Hey everybody, what's going on? I am Gregg Sussman, joined today by Jim Sonis of FanDuel. And we're taking a look at the Memorial, which is at the same place that last week's tournament was at. What's going on, Jim?
Yeah, it's going to create an interesting dynamic, Greg, because you have to decide how much weight do I put on what we saw this past weekend? Because you saw guys like Collin Morikawa and Viktor Hovland just pop off. So do you go back to them again this week as they return to the exact same course? Or do you try to buy into some golfers who may have struggled and try to get them while people are off? So it's an interesting little dilemma here, one we have not had in a very long time on the PGA Tour. So I'm pretty excited to see how things go. How are you doing?
I'm a little disappointed, to be honest, because at the end of last week's show, we promised the people Tiger Woods. And as I look down the list of golfers we're going to discuss today, there's no Tiger Woods. So I'm going to start the show right there. Why is Tiger Woods not among your 6 best DFS plays this week?
I would have been fully willing to jump on board the Tiger train if Xander Schauffele hadn't been just $200 more. So I was willing, Greg. I was ready. I was down to tango. And then they gave me Xander for just $200 less. So you can blame FanDuel for this one for sure.
We'll get to Xander Schauffele in just a minute or so. $200 more than Tiger Woods. But even more expensive than that, well, it's one of the best golfers in the world. And it's Rory McIlroy, who is your top, most expensive golfer at $11,800. Jim, how come Rory is your big-time player here this weekend?
Yeah, we've talked about Rory a ton recently, Greg. We talked about him, just continuing to buy into the success. And the success hasn't been there the past couple of events for Rory, but I think with all the shiny objects in this field, guys like Bryson DeChambeau, guys like Tiger, Justin Thomas, Patrick Cantlay, guys who did really well this past weekend, I could see Rory going a bit more overlooked than usual. And that makes me more willing to be okay with his recent, relative struggles and potentially go with him here at $11,800. The main blemish for Rory so far, or the past couple of weeks, has been his approach play because he's actually down 1/10 of a stroke on approach in the past 3 events. But he's been making up ground off the tee, and he has been nails around the green. So basically what we're saying is, if he can just get his approach play back to where it was previously, not exactly where it was, just like in the ballpark of where it was, he's still doing so well elsewhere that he could just go nuts if he can get that approach play back to the same neighborhood where it was when he was just rattling off top 5 after top 5. And I think that's very much in the range of outcomes because it's Rory freaking McIlroy. Even when you include these 3 events where things have just been a little bit okay for Rory McIlroy, he's still 21st in the field in approach the past 50 rounds, according to Fantasy National. He is 3rd in strokes gained off the tee. He is 17th in scrambling. So I'm going to buy back in to Rory McIlroy at $11,800, hoping that people do overlook him, given the shiny objects in this field. I'm hoping Rory goes overlooked. I'm not saying that's definitely going to happen, but I think there is a path that happening this weekend. When that's the case, we can get a guy like Rory McIlroy at lower popularity than you'd hope. I'm going to buy in every single time.
Given the names in the field, we mentioned Tiger Woods already, Justin Thomas, Patrick Cantlay all playing, plus the guys that performed really well last week like Viktor Hovland and Collin Morikawa. Rory McIlroy, for once, may not be at the top of people's minds. And Jim asked the question at the start of the show, are you going to go with a player that really performed well last week or someone that, has been a bit inconsistent for themselves in Rory McIlroy? That's where we start. Rory McIlroy, a surprise top player here this week at the Memorial. All right, up next, you mentioned earlier Xander Schauffele. He's $200 more than Tiger Woods, and he fits into your lineup here. He's obviously played a lot more this season than Tiger Woods has, certainly since the pandemic began. Xander Schauffele in the lineup this week for you at the Memorial.
Yeah, and Greg, he's one of those guys who was in the field this past weekend, and Xander finished 14th, which is not bad. But he did struggle off the tee, and part of his finish was aided by good putting, and it's hard to project good putting because putting is super random. Now, those are negative things for Xander Schauffele, but I think the long-term form on him is so good that I honestly don't care. I'm going to go back to Xander once again this weekend at $10,800 because Xander Schauffele, if you look at my 4 key stats this weekend, ranks 19th in the field or better in every single statistic. And Justin Thomas is the only other guy in the field who is in the top 20 in even 3 of those stats, and Xander checks all 4 boxes. Last year in the Memorial, at this exact same event, Xander Schauffele gained 4.7 strokes off the tee and 1.5 around the green. So even though he struggled there this past weekend in those 2 categories, we know he can do well, especially at this specific course. So I think I expect a bounce back from Xander off the tee this weekend. And if he does that, he has the potential to take this tournament down for just $10,800. I think he is about $500 underpriced this weekend over on FanDuel. So he is going to be the guy I utilize most often in this range. I think he is a great cash game play, a tremendous tournament play. And I think Xander Schauffele may be the golfer I wind up using most for the Memorial this weekend.
Xander Schauffele, the golfer that may be the most of Jim's lineups, priced very fairly. If he could just improve a little bit off the tee, well, we're in a really good spot. Like you said, 14th last week, nothing to sneeze at, and one of the best players in the world. I have a friend of mine that just bets on Xander every week because at some point it's going to cash consistently. Maybe that'll be this week, but certainly Xander Schauffele belongs in your FanDuel lineups. Up next, as we get a little bit less, under $10,000, that brings us to Joaquin Niemann, who is a staple here at that 3 spot here on the Hurry Up. Niemann, $9,700, as we said. I think it's one of those cases, Jim, I imagine, where if it ain't broke, well, keep going with it.
Yeah, might as well, because I think that Joaquin Niemann kind of is the ideal golfer if we're going to look at what happened this past weekend, because Niemann played really well. He just didn't get public attention for it because his finish wasn't that great. Finished back in 31st. And I think that's actually a good thing for us from a DFS perspective because he played well but didn't get a lot of attention for it, which means he won't get inflated popularity for no reason. That's a good thing for us for sure. Niemann specifically gained 1.4 strokes off the tee and gained 4.1 at approach, but this lost some strokes around the green, pushed him down to a 31st place finish. But that's actually the worst finish Niemann has ever had here at Muirfield. He was 6th at the Memorial back in 2018. He was 27th last year, so good finishes at this course, and we know the ball striking is going to be great. Altogether, Niemann ranks 28th off the tee. He is 15th in approach over the past 50 rounds, according to Fantasy National, and that's in addition to being a plus putter on bent grass, which is not the case for Niemann on most surfaces. So he's $9,700. He's not actually my favorite golfer in this tier. We'll talk about that guy in just 1 second, but I think that Niemann is a pretty firm second. This is a really good tier on FanDuel for this weekend, and I want to be in it as often as possible, but the guy I'll be prioritizing second most will be Joaquin Niemann here at $9,700.
Joaquin Niemann, your second favorite golfer in this tier, and again, a staple of our lineups. He finished just 31st last week, so again, we're taking advantage of some unheralded golfer from last week playing at this tournament, having the experience, someone that is good enough on the greens here that is going to do damage for us. There's a lot to like with Joaquin Niemann, and to me, a no-brainer. But not as much of a no-brainer for you as Paul Casey is at $9,600 here. A consistent player, that's the word that always comes to mind whenever we talk about Paul Casey, is consistency. You're getting him for under $10,000, and it seems like something you can't turn down.
Yeah, at least for me, it's really hard to do so. And as mentioned, we were talking about Niemann. This is a loaded tier this weekend. You've got guys like Mark Leishman, Sung J M, like top-end golfers who are in this range. But to me, Paul Casey is going to be number one because he checks so many boxes. He's someone who does well both from a ball striking and a putting perspective. He ranks 8th in strokes gained off the tee, 6th in approach, and bent grass is the best putting surface for Paul Casey. He ranks 25th in the field there over the past 100 rounds, according to Fantasy National. So good off the tee, good approach, good putting. That's kind of all you can ask for from a golfer. And Casey doesn't have any recent history at Muirfield, but he has played here before. He's played here 6 total times. The most recent was back in 2016, and he did miss the cut there. But he has all the tools necessary for a top 10 finish. So I'm getting Paul Casey in a situation where I think I could get a golfer with a top 10 upside for just $9,600. So again, I want to be in this tier as often as I possibly can. And that does require to spend down for some golfers who are in the low 8,000 range in order to get back up here. But I think it's worth it, given guys like Niemann and Casey being in this range. I think it is the best tier on FanDuel for this weekend. I want to be here as often as possible. The guy I'm going to turn to most often in this tier will be Paul Casey, followed closely by Joaquin Niemann.
This is a tier that Jim is going to live with or will live within. And at Paul Casey, at this number, given that consistency that he mentioned and all the things that he does really well, fits really well here at the Memorial. A no-brainer, $9,600 in a loaded field, in a loaded tier. It's not easy. Paul Casey belongs in your lineup. As we get to the value section of our program, it's no surprise that we get to Lucas Glover, who's also seemingly always around our lineups here at this point. He's priced at under $9,000 this week, $8,700 to be exact. Lucas Glover, once again, in your lineup here, Jim.
Yeah, we are just Glover lovers at this point, Greg. And at $8,700, it's really hard not to. I think that with Lucas Glover, you kind of know the short game's going to suck, and that's kind of an assumed disadvantage here for sure. But he's been so good with his approach play since the end of the COVID-19 layoff that it hasn't honestly mattered. Even though his short game has still been bad, he's been getting good finishes because his approach play has been just bonkers. Glover has gained at least 5 strokes on approach in 3 of 4 events since the end of the layoff. And he gained 3 strokes on approach in the one exception to that. So at least 3 in all 4 events, 5 or more in 3 of those events. And even though he has lost strokes around the green in all 4 of those events, he has also lost strokes putting in 2 of those, he has still finished in the top 25 in all 4 events. That is how good the approach play has been for Lucas Glover. Glover ranks 35th in strokes gained off the tee over the past 50 rounds, according to Fantasy National. So we know he's going to strike the ball well. If he can just stumble into a couple of good putts, he's got big juice for $8,700. I think that what we've seen from Glover on the second and third shots since the end of the layoff is kind of too good to pass up. So I know his upside may be limited because of the short game. That's going to be an issue once again this weekend. But with how good he's been elsewhere, it hasn't mattered. So I'm going to go right back to Lucas Glover at $8,700 until he gives me a reason not to.
Same conversation every week here, Jim. Lucas Glover's approach, what he's doing off the tee, it's just too good to pass up despite his inability to putt the golf ball. But that's okay because maybe he'll put it together here this week at the Memorial and he'll make it work for us in our lineups. One last value player to get to, and that's Erik Van Rooyen here. Erik Van Rooyen, the cheapest golfer we're going to talk about on today's show. He's $8,200. That's really, really cheap. Are you just getting Van Rooyen in there because of the price or because you actually like him this week?
It's a little bit of both, and it's also because I mentioned that I want to get to the Paul Casey, Joaquin Niemann tier as often as possible. In order to do so without limiting my studs, I've got to find guys in the lower 8,000 range, and Erik Van Rooyen is in that range, and I do like a lot of what he brings to the table. Now, Van Rooyen's approach play hasn't been that good in the 3 events he has played since play resumed, and that's concerning, but it also hasn't been good, or it hasn't been bad enough to ignore that he's 35th in the field in approach over the past 50 rounds. So over a larger sample, he's been very good. He is 23rd off the tee as well. So the ball striking over a larger sample has been very good, and the off the tee play has been solid since play resumed as well. So it's just been the approach being kind of weird, but over the larger sample, you expect him to be good in those categories. And we've also seen Van Rooyen compete against tough fields. This is a really tough field for this weekend, so it's important to know that a golfer can hang with the likes of Rory McIlroy, Dustin Johnson, et cetera, et cetera. Van Rooyen has proven that he can do that with what he has done in majors over the past couple of years. Now, Van Rooyen, he's 250 to 1 to win. You're not going to get a win out of this guy, and I think that that is always something to consider. You want golfers in your lineup who have the potential to have a huge weekend win, but I think that Van Rooyen has good odds to make the cut, given how good the ball striking is, and he could potentially get you a top 25 finish. So in a similar mold to Lucas Glover here, and if we can get that out of a golfer, $8,200, and give us access to guys like Joaquin Niemann and Paul Casey who do have that upside, that's pretty intriguing to me. So Van Rooyen, $8,200, I'm going back here again, given how well he has proven himself to be against these good fields. And I think that the ball striking being there is enticing as well. So we're going to overlook some struggles for Van Rooyen since the end of the layoff. But I think the larger picture says we can trust him, especially when his salary is this low.
If you can somehow get a top 25 finish out of Erik Van Rooyen, things have gone very, very well for your lineup. Let's just hope he makes the cut, plays consistently, and allows us to have Paul Casey in our lineups, who also we expect big things from this weekend. There you have it. Those are the picks. That is the FanDuel Hurry Up. Jim, good luck this weekend in more ways than one.
I appreciate it, Greg. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to being back here again next week and talking to you once again. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. We appreciate your time. Tomorrow, Tom Vecchio will join me right here on the Hurry Up. For Jim Sonis, I'm Gregg Sussman. Have a great weekend and stay safe, everybody.